Pride of the British forces arrived at the city to face a challenge less daunting than the Iraqi army, the call of the city marshal.
Comes here! Service men and women of the Gulf forces seeking permission to enter the City of London.
Armed only with the Lord Mayor's invitation, Brigadier Patrick Cordingley, commander of the 7th Armoured Brigade, led the parade on to take the salute of their Commander-in-Chief, Her Majesty the Queen, at the Mansion House. 1,000 soldiers, sailors and airmen chosen to represent those who'd served in the Gulf. It was a deliberately modest affair. The forces keen to stress this was not a victory parade, just a well-deserved homecoming. For the first time in over 500 years, the military marched through the city without their weapons. Very different from the fully armed celebrations here after the Falklands War 9 years ago. Despite some criticism that today's parade was inappropriate, the patriotic crowds greeted them as heroes. Sadly, poor weather curtailed the flypast. Watching from the dais the prime ministers who presided over the end and the beginning of the Gulf conflict, Mrs. Thatcher and Mr. Major. Questions over Europe taking a back seat for once to the issue of defence cuts. Many of the servicemen and women marched under a threat today as the government prepares to axe 44,000 jobs, almost the number of those who served in the Gulf. But in the Prince of Wales, the services found a strong ally today. Their value, he said, should never be underestimated.
And at a time when our armed forces face the prospect of the most profound changes for some 40 years to their structure and role, their recent outstanding success and the way it was achieved is particularly relevant.
The Prince also spared a thought for those who fought against them.
Most of us, I suspect, felt no particular desire to dance in the streets or to gloat unnecessarily over such a victory. In many ways, our sympathies lay with the poor, abused Iraqi conscripts whose tragic fate lay in the hands of one unmentionable dictator.
One of the best-known faces of the war, Flight Lieutenant John Peters, who was shot down and captured by the Iraqis, remembered the British casualties.
It's not just numbers. You're talking wives losing husbands and us losing friends. We lost a friend on Flight Lieutenant Stephen Hicks on our squadron. And I think occasions like this recognise...
And Kuwait. He admits the adjustment to peacetime has not been easy for some of them.
I actually thought it was going to be very straightforward and didn't take over much heed of the people who were suggesting that there could be a problem. But I think there's slightly more of a problem than meets the eye.
There is a reluctance to discuss stress, particularly on a day when the emphasis is on comradeship and regimental pride. But even the regimental sergeant major admitted that he'd been affected.
But I think we all do sit here, especially with our wives and families, and think, well, you know, people were killed and we are lucky to actually be back in, you know, back with our families.
He was very quiet, couldn't sit still, that sort of thing, had to be moving around. But they say that that's characteristic of any time he's been away. A little bit more maybe this time, but they usually are. They're very edgy.
A Tornado pilot, veteran of 20 sorties over Iraq, today talked about the sense of anticlimax that came with the end of the war.
It felt very reminiscent of sort of the days you did your school exams. It's over and you think, what was the fuss about? It's all finished.
Coping with that stress among the subjects...
Come to the City of London.
This was not a traditional victory parade, but a welcome home, the triumphalism muted by the unequal nature of the conflict and the continued